I'm really excited to sit down and chat with Julien and Kiersten Saunders. They're the creators of Rich and Regular and the authors of Cashing Out. We've had a number of conversations about money over the years, but we've never sat down for an in-depth conversation like this. I'm really excited to dive in and can't wait for you all to hear it. I want to start on the topic of money and relationships. Can you talk about how you manage money as a couple and how that's changed over time?
I'll start. We're a team. We're married. We've been married for 6 years now. We've been dating for, I'm doing the math in my head, 8 years. And I think one of the things that we're really grateful for is right when we started dating, our first conversation about money, which actually led to our first argument about money, really kind of triggered not just a lot of self-discovery, but it really got us to thinking about the role that money plays in relationships. And so we're grateful, even though it was a tough conversation, there was a lot of drama that happened because of it. We won't go into those details. What it did do is it gave us a head start, right? Because we've learned, particularly as we've had a lot of conversations with other couples, because that's the number one challenge that they have is how do I get my partner on board? But a lot of times they've waited years to have that conversation. They've sort of avoided it comfortably because, it's almost there's this unwritten rule that you don't have this conversation until after marriage or after you have a child. And then all of a sudden, all the skeletons come out the closet. You realize that someone maybe has a bunch of debt or that these bad habits aren't something that they're gonna outgrow, it's a part of who they are, and it creates a lot of conflict. So we're really grateful.
Yeah, I would say that our relationship and money has been a lot of unlearning for me. So instead of learning how to work with him as a teammate, it's been unlearning all of the rules and things that I was socialized as a woman to believe about the role that I play in our relationship. And so it's been me kind of stepping up and becoming someone who not only just kind of manages the books, my mom always managed the books of the house, my dad brought home the bacon and she kind of managed it. Be me stepping into someone who can do both. I can bring home the bacon, I can manage it, I can make decisions for our family and play a more active role in our finances.
Yeah.
And so what advice do you give couples who are just starting this conversation? If they're watching this and they're thinking, gosh, I've really been putting off that conversation. Do you have some tips that you share with others to get it started?
I think a lot of people think that a sign of progress or success is the absence of conflict, right? This idea that we're not supposed to argue at all, and we're certainly not supposed to argue about money. And I would say, well, without those disagreements, right? Where else are you going to, how else are you going to have the breakthrough? How else are you going to learn about yourself? Or to Kiersten's point, realize that there are some things that you need to unlearn in order to build a new life together. So you really can't be afraid of those arguments. You can't walk into it thinking that if we get into an argument, the whole relationship's going to fall apart and then we're going to have to start over.
So as two of the most visible faces of the financial independence movement, is financial independence available to everyone?
We get that question quite often. I'm sure you get that question often too. I think freedom is human right. Everyone has that. I think it's certainly far easier for some people to accomplish than others. You're in a dual income, high earning, household. It's certainly far easier for you to do if you are a low-wage employee or just starting out, or you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. It's a lot harder to do if you're digging out of a hole and you've got some of these other sort of forces that aren't necessarily mathematical, sort of getting in the way of you being able to accomplish those dreams. But yeah, I certainly think it should be a goal for everyone, but the journey to get there won't look the same.
Yeah.
And I think more people would feel like it's for them or accessible to them if we stop treating it like it's an event and more like a state of being and a process that means something at different stages of your life. I think traditionally we've talked about financial independence as this event that happens, one day you're financially independent and the next day you're not.
Sure.
And that still presumes that things stay consistent. But in a time where things are so uncertain, if the stock market drops 7% the next day after you hit your FI number, does that mean you're any less financially independent than you were yesterday?
Yeah.
Or do you accept that you've now built a life that can allow you sustainability without being dependent on an employer or some other institution to live for your livelihood?
Yeah.
So I think once we start to kind of expand the definition and evolve it, maybe just add to the math part, more people will feel okay, financial freedom for me as a single mom in Detroit looks like being able to take 2 years off to put my health first and figure out what my passion is, and then start a business maybe 2 years later. Like, it doesn't have to be, I've saved up enough money to never have to work ever again in life.
So I know both of you left your full-time jobs to pursue entrepreneurship. I'd love your thoughts on why corporate America isn't set up to help most people thrive.
Yeah, most people absolutely hate their jobs, and they are in a rush to get out of it. And it's for a reason. Part of it is like a bad fit. It could be bad leaders. It could be, I think, that for being fair, we put so much pressure on leaders to be charismatic and a mentor and really sharp thought leaders of what they do and help grow the business. It's like really, really hard. It's hard for everybody.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I think that there are just a lot of things that corporate America, obviously that we're generalizing, just get wrong. And I think for me, or certainly for us, it's around just giving families the kinds of flexibility and the benefits and the support that they need.
I think it's inflexibility and misaligned incentives. I think the incentives are really only aligned in corporate America at the executive level, where they get options, they get stake in revenue, they get all of these benefits to get their teams to work harder. But the teams that are delivering get 2 and 3% increases once a year. But regardless of like how much effort you're putting in over a period of time, your check doesn't change in the year for the year unless you agree to take on more work. And that is a formula that isn't sustainable, especially when wages aren't keeping up with the price of goods. I think inflation just this year is like 6%, somewhere between 4 and 6%. So when your salary can't keep up with inflation, and we're not even talking about specific inflation like education, housing, gas right now, then it's a problem. And it's like, we just want people to think bigger, think broader, to say like you can still get a lot of fulfillment outside of somebody choosing you for one of these very elite roles.
You can be the person that creates change outside of these environments. Like, you'd be surprised how much more outspoken or free you could be if you were to sort of build a safety net outside of these environments.
So the longer that I've actually been financially independent, the more ridiculous everyday Americans' experience actually looks to me. The more exploitative I see that companies are. Why do you think so many people are still afraid to quit their job and take the risk in their life, even to switch a new job or get out of a toxic work situation?
Why people are so scared to take the leap is because when it doesn't work out, when you've put all of your faith into this institution, and Black people particularly are known for putting our faith in institutions to overcome deep oppression. When you put all your faith in your institution, it doesn't work out, you think it must be something you did. And it's like, it actually has nothing to do with you. If you put that same amount of faith in yourself, you would see the kind of results that you're looking for. But these institutions are just not gonna save you. That's not what they're built for.
So you all quit your jobs. Can we talk first about how you prepared to do that and go out on your own and take this risk?
Well, I didn't know I was going to quit my job 24 hours before I did. But, it was really just a really bad environment. And honestly, racism played a role in why I ultimately decided that I was just over it. And I think the biggest thing for me was, it was around 6-8 months after our son was born. And I was really all about being a dad at the time, and thinking about the types of conversations I wanted to have with my son, and also thinking about a lot of the lessons that I'd been given before I even went into these types of environments. And the reality is, in Black communities, you have this idea of, this is what you're going to expect when you go into these environments. It is what it is, but go in, get your money, shut up,
your head down,
and go through it. I did not want to pass that lesson on to my son. I said, you know what? That's not what progress looks like. My best bet was just to bet on myself, and actually to give myself and us credit for the work that we'd already done. We hadn't even hit our target number yet, but we'd made so much progress that we certainly had enough to walk away, bet on ourselves, focus on ourselves, and to Kiersten's point, take all of the work and intellect and ideas and resources that we were pouring into a then dead-end job into ourselves and into our own business. at the point where we walked away, or at least when I walked away, Kiersten walked away, I think a year and a half after I did, we were living in a mortgage-free home. We had zero debt. We had a rental property that had positive cash flow. All that to say, just having a grasp on how much you have, how much you owe, or knowing that you don't owe any of it, like, huge confidence boost. And I think as an entrepreneur is like one of the best secret weapons.
So is there anything that the FIRE movement is missing, in your opinion?
Oh, nuance. The FIRE movement is absolutely missing nuance. I think the FIRE enthusiasts of early days are under the belief that they're very rational people and that if you just follow these steps, this is what happens. And that's just not true. Like, they're missing a lot of nuance, and a lot of times they've been unwilling to live their story out loud as it was happening non-anonymously.
Yep.
And so because of that, because there's not a face and a location and a time in history, you miss some of the nuance. A lot of the steps just aren't repeatable because of the moment they were happening in.
Yep.
Very similar to right now. Like, this is a glitch in the matrix of a global pandemic that has put everything on pause. More workers, from your line workers who are taking strikes right now to the white collar workers who are resigning in numbers. Like, this is a moment. And the content that we create right now has to be nuanced enough to acknowledge that this is a moment. These are the moves that we're all making to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if in 2028, it's going to be a different moment.
Sure.
And so without that historical context, it makes it very difficult to legitimize the steps.
Yeah. I mean, I think the FIRE movement's missing a ton of things. One of the things is just, I'm constantly recognizing now not only the immense privilege that I've had just being a white person in this moment, but also I've just been completely blind in a lot of cases to other people's experiences in this moment and in this journey. I think the biggest challenge for white content creators or even people in the financial space who have great intentions in sharing their story is that the map isn't the same thing as the terrain. And so while the steps are the same, the terrain for people of color is very, very different. It's much rockier, it's far less reliable. And so being able to enhance the knowledge with the emotional kind of terrain of, like, you're gonna feel really rejected, your family's gonna be scared for you, you're gonna be scared for yourself, there's gonna be way more uncertainty than just the uncertainty that's in the world, is helpful to kind of normalize the experience and not make it seem like it's just this victory lap, because it is very, very difficult to do something countercultural, especially if you're missing the safety net of whiteness along the way.
Yeah.
So how has entrepreneurship helped you grow as a couple and as individual people? And I'm saying that through the lens of, there's kind of my life when I was an employee and my life after. And I feel like those are two radically different moments in time where I've been able to, through entrepreneurship, expand so much as a human that I want that to be available to everyone and for everyone to understand that. Can you talk about some of the growth that just happened in your own life through entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it was really about asking ourselves what did we not want? So when I first left my corporate job, I actually tried to replicate corporate in my own business. I would create these meetings and it was very rigid and I had a schedule for myself and a long list of impossible tasks.
Yeah.
And that lasted about a month and a half before I was just like, this ain't it. Like this, I didn't leave my 9 to 5 to create a 24/7 where I am a mean boss to myself. Like, how do I become the kind of boss that I always wanted to myself? And we have a child. And so the way that we create, the type of stories that we tell, the level of authenticity we need to think about, and even the concerns we need to think about around safety and his little developing brain and what that means for our content has been very different than like what we were used to.
Yeah.
So let's talk about cashing out. Yeah. So you've written this book. It's either coming out soon or it's already out. What is cashing out? What does it mean? What's this project?
So the book is part our sort of financial journey. It's part our experience in corporate America and empowering ourselves to leave that environment. I think it's a little bit of asking other Black professionals to hold up a mirror to themselves, sort of rooted in our own experience that we were talking about earlier, and saying, hey, like, what is an alternative path that you might want to consider? And particularly when we talk about things like the FIRE movement, one of the critiques, certainly in the early days, was that it was a predominantly white movement, and that if you weren't a white software engineer, that this movement wasn't for you. And I think, going back to what I was saying about role models, part of that is because that's what people saw, right? They didn't really see people who have a hospitality background or a retail background or any of these other, industries, right? And so we're telling our own story. We're sharing stories of other people that we know look and sound like them, that have achieved remarkable degrees of wealth and freedom. And we're using that as an open invitation for people to at least add the principles of this lifestyle to their repertoire. It's truly like an open invitation for our community to think about the financial independence movement and really just building a life and an escape plan out of a job and a career that you don't enjoy.
And I think it's honestly the first financial book that I've come across that doesn't assume that literacy is the issue.
Right.
We don't write the book as if you don't know what you're doing with money. If you are a African American and have made it to corporate America, you know what you're doing with money.
Yeah.
You have beat the odds in a way that most people dream of. Like, there's a saying that we use, like, I'm my ancestors' wildest dream. And like, what we're saying is not quite. Like, this is part of it, but there's more out there. Like, there's more beyond corporate America. And so what we're trying to do is offer up a different set of questions, a different set of examples and role models to say, you thought that making that six-figure job and having unlimited PTO and like being able to travel business class was like the top of the chain. And it's like, actually, there's this world of like digital entrepreneurship and limitless and new ways that you can use your creativity to contribute that like you haven't even experimented yet. And there's a lot of life left. So cool that you've done this, but like, let's take it to the next level.
Yeah.
I love it. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
This conversation is really long overdue, and I appreciate you taking the time to have it.
I agree.